So thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here because in the CNIL, we have strong links for many years with the self-data movement through the thing and the project Mesinfo with Daniel Kaplan. And of course, we are convinced, we believe that we need to strengthen the links between the DPAs, the data protection authorities, and the self-data movement, or I would say self-data community. Because together, we are in charge of building a brick of the digital societies in which the asymmetry between individuals and big players or states should be reduced. Because the digital economy would grow if it is trustworthy. And it will be trustworthy if it is based on the empowerment of individuals and if companies process their data without compromising their privacy. So in that prospect, I would like to underline perhaps 2 points. The first one is about the GDPR, the famous European regulation, which will be applicable in May 2018. The GDPR is marking a turning point in our regulation system and for data protection, in particular concerning this famous balance between individuals and major players. You know that over the past few years, and there was several interventions this afternoon in this room explaining that very well, the asymmetry between the individuals and the major players has widened, sometimes dramatically. This asymmetry is based both on, of course, the difference of power between an isolated person and major players, but it is based too on territorial barriers, which are, of course, used by some major companies. In other words, sometimes the keyword is worldwide when we talk about services, and sometimes the keyword is territorial barriers when what is at stake is to escape national regulation. That's why the GDPR is really important and is about to remedy, at least partly, to this situation and to rebalance the situation or the relationships between individuals and companies. You know that one of the key points of the GDPR is that it upgrades, I would say upgrades, the previously existing rights in order to make them fully effective in the digital era. Of course, the most important innovation is the famous right to data portability. What is the right to data portability? It is the right for an individual to take back the personal data he has provided to a company in order to share them or to reuse them with other companies without any restrictions. It means that you will be able to take back your data in an electronic format free of any restrictions or any contractual clauses. You will be able to become an actor of the competition between actors, for example, between social networks. You will, for example, pull down your profile, take it, and give it to another social network. So the individual will have, will be boosted or empowered by this right to portability, which is, of course, one of the I would say, core brick of the MyData initiatives. There is several other points very important for the individuals. The second point after this right to portability is that the territorial scope of the GDPR is different from the territorial scope of the current legislation. As you know, the current legislation is based, to be applicable, on the establishment of companies. If you are established in Europe, European law is applicable. If you are not established in Europe, European law is not applicable. With the regulation, everything will change. The regulation will be applicable not only if you're established in Europe, but if you target European citizens, which means that the regulation, the GDPR, will have a common approach for European companies and international companies not based in Europe. You see that it is very important in order to reduce this famous asymmetry between major players and individuals, and in particular with European citizens. Of course, you have several other rights, like, for example, the right to consent, which will be reinforced, the protection for children, of course, and the right to be forgotten, which exists today, but which is reinforced by the regulation, in particular the right to erasure or to be delisted in search engines. So I would say that, and I think that the self-data community will be happy with that. Legally speaking, we enter the age of the empowered individual, if we well implement, of course, the famous GDPR, which means that to enter this age, we must change the way companies are processing data in the sense of a higher responsibility. So, in that prospect, the GDPR puts several evolutions. The first one is, of course, this famous accountability, which means that companies will have to prove that they process data without compromising privacy. The second one is that controllers will be submitted to a higher transparency. And in particular, they will have to notify data breaches affected individuals to the concerned data subject, which means that each time that a company will suffer from an attack, for example, or for a data breach, this company will have to notify to its customers, for example, these data breaches. Third point, which is particularly important, the GDPR creates a legal liability not only for data controllers, but for processors. This is one of the key points because today you have two asymmetry, one between individuals and company and one between controllers and processors. For example, if you're a short company, a startup, using services in the cloud, provided by a major player, you are responsible of the way personal data are processed, while your processor is not legally responsible. Data protection authorities can pronounce fines against controllers, not against processors. Tomorrow, with the GDPR, both processors and controllers will be responsible and will be submitted to the same obligations in terms of accountability. Last point important, the GDPR sets two principles. The first one is data protection by design, which means that the data protection rules and measures should be, or safeguards, should be introduced since day one in products or services. And the second principle is data protection by default, which is that by default, the settings, the privacy-friendly settings will be the norm. So, what is at stake? What is at stake is to create, to match personal interests, which means protection of data, of personal data and privacy, and business interests. Businesses should understand that the protection of personal data becomes a competitive argument. If you see, for example, the consequences of the Snowden revelations in the American industry of cloud, some studies say that the American industry has lost something like $22 billion because of this revelation and because of the European or Asian companies take back their information, their data. You see that protection of personal data has become a competitive argument. So how can we help? How can you help, you, the self-data movement, and how can we help us, the DPA? Your initiatives as the self-data movements are completely in line with the philosophy of the GDPR. We have the same basis, which is a human-centric approach, an approach in which the individual, the citizen, is the center of gravity of the system. And your initiatives, you know, in the English version of the GDPR, when you speak about the individual, it is always the data subject. For example, in French, it is the person. It's very interesting. But you are turning data subjects into data actors. And this is exactly what we need to do in order to create this famous trustworthy climate that we need to build a sustainable digital economy and society. So you see that we are perfectly in phase with you on this subject. Now, what can we do in order to help the development of the self-data initiatives? And so businesses. The first thing is that our first duty as DPAs is to explain and give their full implementation to the GDPR principles and to give to the companies or citizens a single interpretation of the GDPR in the whole Europe. We are building a new governance in Europe, more integrated, in which all the DPAs will jointly approve or jointly adopt decisions in order to give a single interpretation of the regulation. In other words, we are building legal security for all the actors of the chain. You, citizens, businesses, major players, startups, etc. The second one is that we consider in the CNIL that our role is to accompany this kind of initiatives. That's why, for example, we have accompanied the project Mes Infos in France since day one by, for example, providing expertise, advice, trying to decline the regulation of the national legislation so that it can match with the project, etc. And in return, of course, benefiting from the insights the program created on those very innovative issues. This is a symbol, according to us, to what is necessary and to what should be developed between DPAs and self-data movement. Each of us in this area, but each of us cooperating in order to find new ways to bring, to make the exercise of rights, of personal rights, more effective and to empower individuals. So, just to conclude, you see that in our eyes, you are a key piece of the puzzle of a trustworthy, sustainable digital economy. Be assured that both the CNIL and the DPAs see you as an important actor of this construction and that we will accompany you each time it will be possible in order to create the good basis, by design and by default, for the empowerment of individuals in the digital area. Thank you.